So I'm going to start with a question about your primary race in 2008. You actually won that primary by 19 points after the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the DCCC, it basically had selected a candidate that they wanted to be their standard bearer, and you blew it out of the water. I'm curious what you attribute that primary win to. What made Democrats want to go with you?
Well, first of all, I'm going to say part of it was being naive. I had never run for political office before.
Yeah.
And it was a friend of mine who asked me to run, and I told him he was crazy. And then my husband kind of agreed with my friend, and I told him he was crazy. And then eventually I did run. But I think going into a race of that magnitude, it's daunting. But I didn't really understand how daunting it was to run for Congress. I'm a person who loves the challenge, but I'm a person who really cares about my community, cares about my country. And I just felt I had a skill set that would really be good for this. And I knew one of the things we were going to be doing, and we're going to talk about this, was healthcare reform.
Yeah.
And I was a dietitian.
Okay.
And I had worked in healthcare for many, many years. So I understood a lot of the intricacies of this. I was also a mother of five. So I understood what a lot of families were going through in multiple different aspects of what the government would do for them or couldn't do for them. And so I think when I put my name out there, first of all, I was running against three other white males.
Yeah.
So I was the one difference.
Yeah.
I think that makes a difference when you're running in a more crowded race like that.
Yes.
I think I come across as genuine and caring and real. I think again, my experience that I had, uh, again, being a mother, being a dietitian, being a business owner, my husband and I own business, and then all of my volunteer work. What I found amazing was throughout this uh, district, which is fairly large, parts of Seven County, a lot of people knew me from the things I had done over the years, people I didn't realize I'd be connected to. My husband and I were very involved in our Catholic church, and we did something called Marriage Encounter. And we'd gone around to churches all throughout the diocese and done what they call pulpit talks that talk about marriage encounter. And then we presented on all these weekends. But a lot of people had seen us, not only in Erie County, but in Warren County and in Crawford County and down in Mercer County. And so I had a name recognition and a face recognition.
I think people is connected to you.
Right. So I think that that's part of it. I always tell people when they say, what should I do if I want to run for office? I say, get out and do a lot of different things and meet a lot of different people.
Yeah.
Because those people have networks and they will continue to spread word about you if the person who thinks you're a good candidate.
Yeah.
So I think it was a lot of different factors, but I think those were some of the big ones.
Yeah. And built on this, and my brother definitely wanted me to talk about this, but you broke the congressional gerrymander. The maps in 2008 were
I know.
incredibly.
I was the first Democrat in 32 years to hold the seat.
Yeah.
That was a huge piece. But I will say, a lot of it's luck, and with politics, I tell people all the time, run at the opportune moment. If you see the moment, jump in and run, because the opportune moment may be gone.
Yeah.
The next time the election comes around. And I was there at the right moment. There was a lot of very negative backlash against Bush and the Republicans at that point. When I talked to a guy named Dan Shea, who at the time was heading up the Center for Political Participation at Allegheny College. He had written a book called Campaign Craft. I sat down, had lunch with him. I said, "Oh no, what do you think? I'm contemplating running." And he told me I had a 5% chance of winning.
Oh, wow.
Taking on an incumbent who'd been there for 7 terms.
Yeah.
And but he said it's going to be a very good year for Democrats. And he said, and you have a very interesting background that could play really well.
Yeah.
And he was absolutely right.
And it was a good year for Democrats, but talking about you uniquely, you won areas that even President Obama did not win. So, that I think would be attributed to your strength as a candidate and perhaps the background you just talked about.
Right.
How did that feel? Did that?
It was an amazing. It was. I'll tell you, there was nothing more exhilarating than that night and winning that election against the incumbent, and then Bill English. I have to tell you the one funny story. So we were having our after party at the Saga Club, and one of my friends came up to me. I think this was actually in the primary. She said, "Oh my gosh, this is so fun. I've never been at one of these." And I said, "I haven't either." So I had not really been that politically connected to go to those kind of events. And then after I won the primary and most of the people were leaving and my husband and I went out and got in the car, and it was very late at night, my phone rang. It was Hillary.
Oh man,
I'm like, wow.
I would have lost my mind.
That was she was the first person outside of the people I knew in the room to congratulate me on my win, and I'll never forget that. I
Wow.
still have chills right now telling you that.
I have chills listening to
It was an amazing thing to pick up my phone and Hillary Clinton, I want to congratulate you on your win.
and have somebody like Hillary Clinton, who is one of my political heroes. I mean, paying attention to races like this. I think
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
incredible.
And one other tidbit about that race, when I was running in the primary, I didn't pick a candidate. I didn't endorse
Right.
either Obama or Clinton. And I did that on purpose because then I could go to all of their rallies.
Yeah.
So they were coming into Erie County as we are always, one of those purple counties that are here campaigning in. I was able to go to her events. I was able to go to Obama's events, and a couple of the other candidates had put their hat in the ring for one or the other.
Yeah.
And then they really couldn't go to the others' rallies.
Yeah.
So that's a great way to do a great door to door as you find the huge lines trying to get into a Clinton or Obama rally, and you just go shake every hand in the line.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a great retail politics there.
Yes, and you make yourself available to all of their supporters, and
And I love retail politics.
Yeah.
It really works in Erie County.
It really does.
People want to know that they've met you, that they shook your hand, that they've seen you somewhere. And I did a lot of that. And nobody outworked me, that's for sure. I was doing door to door places like Emlenton. People in Emlenton said, we've never had anyone down here doing door to door. So I was out in all of these little tiny places throughout this very large district. And I'm a door to door maniac. I love it. But you got to do it, and you got to do it fast, and you can't stay too long in each store because you got another door to hit. And I became very, very efficient and good at it.
Yeah.
And I had my daughter by my side a lot of the time. And we had a lot of fun doing it together. And then other friends and supporters. But yeah, I think there was a lot of reasons why I won and went so soundly.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on to some of the things you accomplished while in Congress. And I'm going to read from here to make sure I get all of this. There's a few things I want to talk about relating to the Affordable Care Act. We just celebrated 15 years.
Amazing.
Yes. Landmark legislation. I don't think some people now even look back and realize just how much the Affordable Care Act has changed the landscape in America. Something that I admire about you is, and this is the theme of sort of this topic for me, is political courage. First and foremost, related to that, the former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, who I also admire a great deal, wrote in her book, The Art of Power, which was published last year, that all throughout 2009, as House Democrats, emphasize that, led the charge to pass the Affordable Care Act. You know, Democrats were taking political heat from all sides, being slaughtered on TV with negative ads. And, Republicans were winning that messaging war, and in part kind of attributed that to a lack of political coverage from the Obama White House. So you voted for the Affordable Care Act, despite what must have felt like enormous pressure not to at the time. What was it that gave you the conviction and the courage to support the Affordable Care Act, despite the potential electoral consequences you may face?
I went to Congress to actually get things done, not to be reelected. And I think that's the line for me.
Yeah.
It's what I would say would sit with my staff, and we talk about all sorts of different bills that were coming up in front of us, and the more controversial ones, I'm like, well, what is the right thing to do?
Mm-hmm.
Not always the most politically correct thing to do, but what's the right thing to do for the people I represent?
Yeah.
So for me, a lot of people go to Congress and are there for decades.
Yeah.
And don't have much to really show for what they've got there.
Mm-hmm.
I know I do. I have a very important bill for America most likely would have passed if just a few of us were not in Congress, and I was one of those. It only passed by 2 votes.
Yeah.
And so, being part of that, being part of some of the things that happened in the last final hour were hugely important. But I do want to go back to Nancy Pelosi because I think she will go down in history as one of the best speakers of the House ever.
Absolutely.
She is a master when it comes to whipping votes. I mean,
Yes.
watching her on the House floor is just amazing. She is truly masterful at making sure that she counts for votes before she brings a vote up. And she wouldn't bring it up unless she knew she could get it passed. And then she had to make deals. And she had to, maybe let something go to get a vote for somebody. So that's what you have to do. It's all, as I say, it's sausage making, but it is. And it's not in a negative way, but we are a huge country with all sorts of different constituents with different ideas of how things should go. And even within the Democratic Party, we are very diverse.
Yes.
And you've got a much more conservative area like Northwest Pennsylvania versus San Francisco, where she's
Right.
at. And
Right.
she recognizes that. And I remember one day she would have these breakfasts with the freshman class. That's what we were called. And one day I said, with all due respect, I speak. I think you really understand what's going on in Northwest Pennsylvania, and try to explain some of the consternation happening here and why people were upset about whatever the issue was we were talking about. So, and she listened, and she understood, and she knew this for many, many years of Congress, that her experience in California or somebody's experience in, Arkansas and mine here in Northwest Pennsylvania, they were all important, and we had to make sure that we could get the votes to move the best legislation forward.
Yeah, and be able to explain to your constituents at home what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we didn't have much cover for the White House.
Yeah.
And that was another conversation. There was a number of us who were in very vulnerable seats at a lunch at the White House with the president. And we were all pleading, please, like, send in the air troops. We wanted coverage here.
Yeah.
And we were not getting it back home. There was a billboard on I-79 that stayed up for probably a year or two after I was out of office. That was a hammer and sickle, anti Kathy Dahlkemper. And it just amazed me, the vitriol that happened. Am I trying to give people health care?
Yeah.
Try to make sure people could get the treatment and the wellness that they needed, And I just thought it's so stunning that people could be so angry about trying to make sure that their fellow human being didn't have to go bankrupt.
Right.
Because they were sick. Didn't have to avoid a doctor and potentially die because they didn't have health insurance.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of things that it's just the human being and the caring person. I find it difficult to understand how they would just say no.
I still find it difficult. It's bizarre. And going back to that political coverage conversation, I feel like this is a bit of a theme with Democrats sometimes. I think sometimes we feel we're doing the good work, and we are, but we don't necessarily feel we have to explain it. And we saw that with, President Obama, what we're talking about now. We saw it a little bit with the Biden administration, where a lot of important stuff got done, but people didn't know it and people weren't aware of it. Why do you, I mean, maybe this is a bit of conjecture, but why do you think that was and is?
Republicans are bastard law.
Yeah.
They are. They have a sheet they give everybody from the House floor. And these are our talking points, and everybody sticks to them. And they find that right little message, whether it's make America great or whether it's drill baby drill or whatever they might say. We don't think we're into policy, right? We're in the weeds more, I think. And we need better messaging that's just going to resonate with the general public out there. And I don't know who could come up with it. Somebody smarter at marketing than I am. But that's a big issue.
Do you think perhaps it's more difficult to market the truth?
Yes.
Okay.
I do think it is. Lying is sometimes very easy to do, or untruths,
Getting people angry.
Yeah. And it's the politics of fear
Yeah.
that the Republicans use. I don't think Democrats use the politics of fear. And we should more, but we don't. We try to talk about climate change, and we try to talk about it in a way that's sensible and truthful, and yeah, they use the politics of fear a lot.
I've always said that I think Democrats, where we fall short, and it's not even necessarily through any fault of our own, but I feel like we rely on optimism. It's going to be way easier to sell people fear of what could be, and then it is to get people to come together on, we could do this if we all work together, or if we all do these things or check these boxes, or all chip in. It's way easier for Republicans to say, remember how great things were 20 years ago, even if that's maybe not the case.
Right.
People who emphasize the past. So yeah, I've gone off on a bit of a tangent. Sorry.
Oh, that's this is it's all so pertinent for today.
Yeah. And our success in the future. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
You kind of touched on this, but on the campaign trail in 2024, Governor Tim Walz repeatedly discussed being elected, him and Vice President Harris being elected, and quite literally burning political capital, being elected, like you said, to make change, not to get reelected. What do you think has changed between your time in Congress when, all of these brave frontline Democrats voted for things like the Affordable Care Act that were so controversial, to today, where you have, what are two kingmakers across the country that, put their reelection prospects above all else. And in, the Biden administration's case, didn't even run for reelection. I'm talking about Joe Manchin, Kirsten Sinema, who ended up killing the Build Back Better bill, and it ended up being very downside. What do you think has changed?
Well, I mean, I think one thing is we actually had a super majority, so we had more people,
Yeah.
and so some of those people didn't vote for the Affordable Care.
Yeah.
I mean, when you go back and look at it, there was a number of Democrats who did, and there was a lot of consternation in some of the meetings we've had about those who felt they could not vote for it. But again, the people sometimes are not voting for it because they needed to hold on to their seat for their own ego. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's their job.
Yeah.
That's what they've always done. They've been called the senator or the congressperson for so long. They don't know another identity. What am I going to do if I don't win re-election? There's financial situations that people consider, and that's too bad.
Yeah.
I always felt that, if I didn't have my seat, I would be okay.
Yeah.
And I didn't go in there thinking this was going to be my career. This is what I needed to hold on to. And I think a lot of people do. But again, you only have a majority that's
Couple of seats.
couple of seats. You have anybody defecting, you're not going to get a lot passed. And we did have a number of Democrats who did not vote for some really significant pieces of legislation.
Yeah.
When I was there, whether it be Affordable Care Act, whether it be Dodd-Frank, whether it be Don't Ask, Don't Tell, whether it be the Lilly Ledbetter. I mean, there's a lot of good legislation. We were actually one of the most productive Congresses in history, but we also did have a cushion. We had a pretty good cushion that we could lean on to get those things passed in those first 2 years.
Yeah, and a lot of people now, I feel like, when we had a very light blue Senate and a very light blue House of Representatives in 2021, 2022, under President Biden, people thinking, oh, well, Democrats have the House, they have the Senate. Why aren't they getting more done? Why is this big landmark stuff not getting done? And that's exactly the answer is, you don't have the numbers and it becomes a math game. And that's a frustration I have with the internet, as I will call it, is you people run rampant with these, why aren't they doing more? Why aren't they doing more? And this is why.
Yeah. And I mean, the Republicans have the same issue right now.
Yeah.
And they had a rule not passed, so they had to shut the House down this week.
Yeah.
So that happened because they don't have a very large majority. So any defectors are going to have an issue.
Right.
So I think when you have this tightly, or I should say, tiny control, in one of the houses, it's really hard to make this happen. That's why the Senate, of course, they have changed the rules.
Yeah.
To not have the filibuster, and so it just depends on the timing. But I do think there are a number of people who just need to stay there for a lot of myriad of reasons, want to stay there for a myriad of reasons, and will not do what they need to do for many bills and what they go recommend.
Yeah.
Now, there are some that'll say, okay, if it's this particular issue that I feel that strongly about, and I decide to go have a figure about it.
Yeah.
But you also have to understand the districts where you're from, and you were elected from those districts to represent those people on the issues that you ran on. And some people didn't run on some of these other issues.
Yeah.
So, as much as maybe somebody wants the Green Deal to be the next thing that's on the agenda, somebody else in a more rural industrial place, I think the Green Deal is going to be actually good for their economy. So I think that's the other thing you need to think about it.
Yeah.
But we're representing just this small 700,000 plus people. And what's best for them is not always the same thing that's best for another member of your same party.
Yeah, that's a big tent party. That's our whole purpose.
We are a big tent party. Yes, we are.
Sometimes very frustratingly so, but yes.
Yeah.
2010 was a famously bad year for down ballot Democrats in the midterms. The near supermajority that was elected with President Obama in the Senate and the House both saw, as then Vice President Biden said, a shellacking. That was the word used to describe that November. This was largely tied to negative perceptions of the Affordable Care Act. Mm-hmm. How much of that year do you think was inevitable? Because there's always a bit of a back and forth swing. How much of that year do you think was inevitable versus bad investment in down ballot Democrats?
I mean, I think we could have all used more money to fight back. We could have used more air cover from the Obama administration. We could have had better messaging, going out on what this was going to do for people.
Yeah.
But I think until people actually experienced it and felt it, we probably weren't going to win that. And, there's so many things in life. You can think about how people were against it and now everybody loves it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to take something just very local, when they were putting the library down in the Bay Park, there's so many people against it. Now everybody thinks it's the best thing ever. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, so the community college, which we're probably going to talk to about later on.
Yeah.
Even the current county executive had a petition out to stop it, and now he's in favor of it. So once things happen, and and I'm a mother, so I'll say, once I get you to eat your peas, you're going to be a healthier person, right? So once we can get the hard part through, then people realize, oh, that doesn't taste so bad. Oh, okay, I kind of like it.
Yeah.
So, and then eventually, oh yeah, this is doing a lot of good for me, and now I really like it.
And how does that feel for someone like you who is on the front lines? You just named two things. I mean, the Affordable Care Act and the community college, which we'll talk about later when we talk about your time as county executive. But you're spearheading these things. You're on the front lines fighting for these things, and people are, sneering at them in real time. And then later on, how does it feel? Do you feel vindicated?
I feel vindicated.
Yeah.
And you know what? I always tell people when they want to run for office, please run for the right reason.
Yeah.
And if you sit there and do nothing, we've got a lot of elected officials go in and do hardly anything.
Yeah.
You can probably stay as long as you.
Yeah.
But if you go in there and try to make positive change and have a legacy when you leave, most likely you're going to run into a lot of difficulty keeping the seats if you do, and lose. Yeah. But just be aware of that. Be okay with that. Yeah. When you run.
You actually wrote a provision in the Affordable Care Act that allowed kids to stay on their parents' insurance until they were 26 years old. That's huge.
Yeah.
I know. Did you feel that was important to include?
Well, I would hear people say, and of course my youngest just went to college right when I went to college. And I would hear people say, oh, my kid has to go to college so they can stay on my health insurance. I'm like, well, that is the most ridiculous reason to go to college, right?
Yeah.
But that was the reality at the time. Because if you stayed in college, if you went from high school to college, you could save your parents' insurance till you got out of college.
Yeah.
But if you didn't know what you wanted to do, or you wanted to try out a trade or whatever, you were knocked right off your parents' insurance. Yeah. Because they just got out of high school.
Which is so cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So that right there was one thing I thought about.
Yeah.
The other is I know a lot of people, their first job doesn't include benefits. Yeah. And so now, okay, again, we're going to people, they're educated, they're out. And what if something happens to them?
Yeah.
And then the third thing is I'm a real big believer in entrepreneurship and letting people try to help create more jobs.
Yeah.
And if you're an entrepreneur, you don't have health insurance, so you can afford it. And you go right off the bat.
Right.
So we are actually discouraging innovation and entrepreneurship by not covering somebody with their health insurance. So I originally, I think, had put in there for 29, but I think I knocked that to 26, which I still was fine with because at least that kind of takes care of a few of those bigger issues I talked about.
Yeah.
And then, it was actually a very well received. I got signatures on my bill from both sides. A lot of co-signers, both R and D.
And then
that was a very, very bipartisan amendment, and people loved it. Someone actually in my own party tried to steal it from me and claim it as his own, but I was able to get it back and say, no, my name is on this. This is mine. It came out of my office. And I'm very proud of it. And I've actually had people stop me, especially early on, and tell me how much it did for them and their family. I had one gentleman tell me that they probably would have had to sell their home to pay for the cancer treatment that their young 20-something son needed if he hadn't been able to stay on his show. And that's what people had to do. And then I had another intern actually in my office when I was an executive who came to me, and one of his last days he wanted to talk to me, and he said that his brother had a spot on his skin and went to the doctor and it was melanoma. And he said if my brother had not been on my parents' health insurance, he probably would have ignored it and not gone and probably didn't do it. So those are just two stories of a number of stories I heard over the years. And anytime I'm like speaking in front of a group and this comes up and they know that I authored that amendment and got it to the bill, people are always so grateful. And I can't tell you, I mean, I would say at least 80% of the room will raise their hand because they had somebody who benefited from it, their child, themselves, and so a lot of people have used that over the years. And It's cost us really nothing.
Yeah.
That's the federal government, right? So, and most people who are in their 20s don't need to go to the doctor.
Right.
So it costs our insurance companies very little. But for those few that need it, it really is a life changer.
And again, I would imagine that that feels incredibly rewarding. You went to Washington to make change, and you did, and you hear the stories of it every day.
I say that one bill alone lets me sleep at night.
Yeah.
Because I know I've helped millions of young people.
Yeah.
Millions.
Saving lives is your legacy, essentially.
You know what? You have to, what's your life purpose? My life purpose was to lead in order to save lives. That's
Yeah.
what I came up with a number of years ago. And that's sort of been my guiding principle. And that can be figuratively or it can be literally. And in this case, it's actually literal.
That's incredible. And I mean, you answered my next question was, what are the stories that you've heard? Did you experience any resistance to that provision at all?
I don't remember any resistance to it.
Okay.
Again, it was a very popular bipartisan bill. And I think in any way, if they continue to try to get the Affordable Care Act, that piece, I can't imagine it would go away because it's popular on both sides. Yeah.
Oh God, my gosh. Um, I also want to ask you, I tell me about just in general on this bill, the Affordable Care Act. What was there any drama? Was there any, you know, getting? I know you mentioned, in that last hour even.
Right. There was a lot of drama.
Yeah.
So one of the craziest stories, the Saturday before we passed the bill on Sunday, there was very, very angry crowds down at the Capitol building. I mean, tens of thousands of people were down there with all sorts of signs on both sides and yelling back and forth.
Yeah.
There's actually a very famous scene where Nancy Pelosi and some of the other leaders come out of the Cannon building to walk over to the arm in arm to walk over to the Capitol, but mostly we go down through the tunnels.
Yeah.
And but I did take off my congressional pin and I walked outside that day because I just wanted to feel the energy and see what's going on out there. And it could be a little frightening, but it was also very exhilarating in many ways too. So I went back into my office and we were just waiting. They're doing a lot of just procedural voting and we're voting on the names of post offices to try to keep us all there while, again, we're making sure we have the votes to get this passed. And at one point, I was one of the few, there was only about maybe a dozen of us at the most who hadn't publicly said which way we're going to vote on this.
Okay.
And some of us were still waiting on a few pieces on it. So I had people outside my door screaming. And so finally, it was Saturday, and I said to my staff, "We can close the door. You do not need to be open. These people aren't even our constituents. They were coming from all over the country." So we closed the door, and then we could hear people out there. "We know you're in there, Representative Dahlkemper," and banging on the door and carrying on. And then we had a vote called. I had already brought up the congressional campus police twice to disperse this crowd outside of my office. And so I said to my staff, I said, "I'm not going out there into that crowd. And you have 15 minutes to get over to the house for your vote." So I said, "I'm going to go out the window." There was a small ledge that was maybe about a foot and a half, 2 feet, probably about 2 feet wide. And then
Oh my gosh.
there was this other little office just down past my office that we would use as a conference room. I said, "Go in there," to one of my staffers. I said, "Open that window. I'm going to walk across." And I'm on the fifth floor. I don't like heights either. But anyway, I walked the ledge and then I came in the other window. The young staffer helped me in there and I said, "You have the elevator queued up." Yeah, the elevator ready. I went out the door, went right in the elevator down through the tunnels, and I was into the Capitol building without anybody really seeing me. So it was
at all.
it's one of those crazy stories, but I'm telling you what, they were angry and I was in some ways afraid. And I did have death threats during this time too.
Yeah.
I had to have the FBI, go see a few people in the third district. It was a third district at that point, and make a visit to a few people who had sent me some death threats. So it was a crazy time. There was a lot of emotion, just like there is obviously right now, even about things. There's a lot of emotion. But for a member of Congress, for the person elected, we are human beings, and I say that whether it's R or D, we should all respect people in office. We should in no way threaten anyone for how they are voting. They were elected, and there's always another election. If we don't win, and really made sure I wasn't in the next time, but that's okay. I did what I could do.
Because look what you did. I mean, incredible. That's a very funny story, but also My God, like crawling out a fifth-story window to make his vote. That's insane. I'm glad you were okay.
I was okay. I wasn't going to do it if it was not safe. It was safe.
Whew. I hope that was like solid, like marble. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's a very big concrete.
Yeah. Um, Tied to what you just said about there's always another election. Um, you had 19 town halls throughout the summer of 20, or I almost said 2019, 2009.
Yeah.
While this was all happening, you faced your constituents. You showed up. You've answered questions despite the anger, despite the frustration, and despite lack of, as we talked about, coverage. And you kind of maybe felt like an island at times, compared to now, where the Republican Party and, in my opinion, the media are seemingly in lockstep. They're all kind of united in their goals. They're not facing their constituents, and they're not showing up to town halls, and they're not talking to voters. Why do you think that is? And what do you think the difference between people like you who show up is and people now in power? Why do you think that's happening?
I think the cowards.
I would agree.
I mean, they let people like to do it. The House of Representatives, people, it is the people's house.
Yes.
And you should have connections with the people in your district, whether the ones that agree with you or the ones that don't. And you should talk to them. And it just shouldn't be through even town halls, which are, I did a few of those too, and they're good to reach it. You can actually reach a greater audience. I
Yeah.
think you also need to hold some public town hall meetings in person with people. And I often laugh at this, of course, because I'm a woman. So I was willing to do this and face the crowds, and these men are not willing to. So I don't get that. I don't understand the fear of this, And I did it. And I actually got a strategy around it. After I did one or two inside, and I could feel how the tension was growing
Yeah.
and the anger, I took them outside. So I had majority of my town hall meeting outside, and I did them all over the district,
Yeah.
all the different counties. But it would dissipate the energy a bit,
Yeah.
and I would start from the back as I would come in to talk, and I would find like the angriest looking man in the crowd, and go right up to him and handshake, get my handshake and handshake a few other people. Then I'd make my way up, and I held onto my microphone. I never gave up the microphone. I always just held it for them, and so I was able to kind of control. You have to just find strategies to control these type of things. And I guess going back to our messaging, I wanted to explain it to people.
Yeah.
I wanted to explain the good. I wanted them to understand that this was going to help them. Now, I don't know that I really made much of a difference in changing the minds of most of these people.
Yeah.
And I think if the Republicans come in front of us, they're probably not going to change the minds of most of the people. But I still think we were elected for the people, and we should show up and hear them at least.
And be accountable. Yeah.
Can be accountable. And you know what? And if they don't want to elect me again, then that's the choice. And that was the choice. But that's okay. So I am very disturbed by the lack of transparency and by the lack of connection to the people that they serve. Right.
Do you share any concern with the folks that say these people are acting as though they're never going to have to face voters again?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm trying to understand your question at the member of the Congress.
Yeah, I mean, there's a general feeling that Republicans right now are operating under kind of the mechanism or with a mindset or an attitude that they're never going to be held accountable at the ballot box for their actions now. And there's a I think a general fear of will we ever have elections again? I think the answer is obviously yes, but
I think they'll be accountable in less than 2 years. And
hope so.
I think they're going to find out some things. And I think even this past election, just in
Wisconsin
was an example
Yeah.
of that. Now we have a long way to go to be able to change the trajectory of 2 years, and I hope we can. But yeah, elections have processes, and people have to get out the vote. But these people will face now the third district, or not the 16th district of Pennsylvania. It's a tough district to win.
Absolutely.
And I commend all the people since I've been in office who've stepped up and run good races and tried really hard to take this seat. Usually when you're a county, the rest of it is so difficult.
Very difficult.
And it's gotten more difficult. Like even Mercer County, which I won in my first election, I did not win in the second, has become more red.
Yeah.
And so people say it's gerrymandered. I'm like, it really isn't too gerrymandered. The problem is we are fenced in. You're fenced in by New York, Ohio, and the lake.
Yeah.
And the only way we could get more blue is to take a big sliver out of Allegheny County. That's gerrymandered.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that's the distance.
And yet we saw in 2018, Ron and pull it up very close. So who knows what the backlash?
Right.
Yeah.
So if you get there for the right moment,
Yeah.
and if the backlash is big enough here, you you could potentially do it again, and then you're gonna fight like heck.
Yeah.
To stay in after 2 years.
Yeah.
Because this is not the friendliest district.
Not at all, which is why I applaud anyone who runs.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I thank them. I thank them, and I always try to help them.
You have, and we'll talk about this too. You have a huge hand in getting people, involved and
Yes.
and running. So I applaud you for that as well. Moving on from the Affordable Care Act, I want to talk about Don't Ask, Don't Tell for a minute. You voted to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which, people in 2025 look back and they say, oh, why did I think a lot of the context on that is lost. The 90s were a very different time. And President Clinton, instated that as a compromise. There's a major push, I think, from both sides of the aisle, but especially Republicans, to entirely ban LGBT members from serving in the military at all. And this is the compromise. We outgrew it, and you helped to take it down. Um, can you just kind of remind people where the country was on gay rights in 2010 and how far we've come and what it felt like in that moment in time? Did you have any reservations? Was there any concern that it would not be, again, a politically astute decision?
It was so different. Yeah, I was running in 2008. My youngest son came out. I found out he was gay. Nothing huge surprise, but
Yeah.
and I was running for football.
Yeah.
And I said, well, we're here, we love you. But can we just wait until after November to talk about this publicly?
Yeah.
And that's the reality of where we were
Yeah.
politically. It was a very different time, especially in the conservative area like Northwest Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
But that was actually one of the reasons why I was really proud to vote for the repeal of that because of my son. And my daughter is in the military; she's in the Coast Guard, and I talked to her about it, people she serves with, and so I was proud, very proud to repeal that. But you have to remember that the Supreme Court decision on gay marriage didn't happen until 2015. So a lot happened in basically 6 years. A lot
A ton happened.
changed that trajectory.
Yeah.
And today, really?
Yeah.
They don't hardly remember that, especially if they're younger. And so, but it was politically risky at the time.
Yeah.
But I didn't have any cost.
I remember where I was when I saw the news. I was not supposed to be on my phone, but I was. I was at Collegiate Academy in between classes and reading about it, and you know, I had a feeling, about myself as well, and that was kind of gay rights was my like intro to politics. It was like I have feelings about this, as a teenager, and I remember seeing that, and I feel like my heart just kind of dropped in a good way. It just dropped. It was like, oh my God, things, might be changing, and this issue that I care about, other people care about it. And so thank you, but also
Sure.
incredible.
Well, I think it was one of the last, it was on the latter part of my career.
Wasn't it like a lame duck?
Yeah.
It was like December.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So I already knew I wasn't elected. So
Yeah.
again, there was no political risk, right?
Yeah.
I remember that. And there was a couple other bills that we voted for that were just so important.
Yeah.
I'm just going to tell a side story here, but
Go ahead. Yeah.
after I lost my election, I lived in an apartment building down there that Kathy Gifford lived in also.
Okay.
I told her about the apartment and so she said, well, you don't really need to keep the apartment for December. We got a lame duck session if you want to just move in with me for the month. So Gavin and I were roommates the month of December.
Oh my gosh.
And then it was January 7th that she reached out. So we became very close. We had been close anyway, but close at the end there. And so there lies in the risk, I guess, but you can't completely protect yourself from every risk anyway. And she without the meaning constituents. They said, what a brave person.
Yeah.
Even after that popped out.
Yeah. And again, you mentioned it earlier, a woman who, there's all these negative perceptions and backwards perceptions. And this is a woman who goes out and is attacked physically in a way that she still has not fully been able to recover from.
Absolutely.
That's horrific.
But I don't think she would have ever done anything different.
Yeah.
So,
brave.
So, yeah, I hope that some of them become more brave and get out there
Me too.
and talk to victims. And I would ask.
Yeah. But it's always the women who are.
Of course.
I want to talk about Dodd-Frank too. Can you? I see you have some notes. Can you?
It's been a while since I bought
Yeah,
Dodd-Frank.
same. uh, what was the Dodd-Frank Consumer Protection Act? Can you educate people on what it is, why it was important, what implications it had for the post 2008 crash economy, and still today?
Yeah, so we had a great recession.
Yeah.
And a lot of people lost their homes, and a lot of businesses that we thought were too big to fail had failed, and took a lot of people down with them, including a little person, not just the big person, right? The man in terms of maybe your status in the financial world. So something had to be done to enhance safety for consumers, to put some stability around our financial system. Yeah. It was really one of the big reasons why so many Democrats won, because we were going through a very, very bad time.
Yeah.
And in the end of the day, when people vote, they mostly vote on the.
Yep.
Do I feel like things are good for me? And things were not good in 2008 for most people.
Right.
So that's what this bill is about. It's complicated. There's a lot of pieces to it, but one of the things that did come about was the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, was to really do protections around mortgages and credit cards and other financial instruments like that. The current administration is trying to dismantle that entire bureau,
of course,
but it was important, and not everything about that bill is perfect, or any bill.
Right.
Affordable Care Act, all of them. They all need to be massaged as time goes on. You find out what's working, what's really not. And even Barney Frank, there was a bill that came forward, I think maybe like 4 or 5 years later, that yes, this needs to happen because some of things weren't right. But you don't just throw the whole baby out with the bathwater, right? They say, right? So those are the kind of things that was there to protect. It was to make sure that we didn't have these too big to fail, entities that would have to pour billions of dollars, taxpayer dollars, into to keep them afloat, and to really make sure that there was more guidelines along to see their financial instruments.
Yeah. And how is that? I mean, I know that there was I don't know if attack is too strong of a word, but there was a rescinding of, I guess, part of it in 2018.
That's 2018. Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember what year that was. Yeah.
Fuzzy on some of the details, but I mean, what implications does it have in 2025? It's still,
It's still there. I mean, you want to make sure that people who get mortgages can actually afford the mortgage.
Right.
There was predatory lending going on.
Yeah.
And people didn't understand what they were signing, and then the next thing you knew, they were losing their house and all the savings that they had thought they were building up in a home, and they haven't. Probably a lot of those people haven't covered today.
Yeah.
So what they did find is that this bill did create some financial stability. It did protect consumers. Credit cards, again, still not great, but they were worse back then. It's hard to believe, right? So yes, we still need to. It was actually the biggest overhaul of our financial system since the Great Depression.
Which, big statement to those listening and watching. That's a big deal.
That's a big deal. And again, there are probably always things that could be improved.
Yes.
And that's what Congress should be doing.
Yeah.
They should be looking at these big bills like that, saying, okay, what's working, what's not, and let's have some legislation about fixing what doesn't work.
Did you have Republican support on that bill? I'm fuzzy.
Yes. I think 3 senators voted for it.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember on the House side. But
not broad bipartisan support,
not
but some.
Yes, but some. Okay. Because by that point, there was no supermajority in the Senate, because Kennedy died.
Yes.
And actually, we didn't have that for the Affordable Care Act either.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother story, but that'd be a whole nother podcast. But we actually had to vote on the Senate bill in the House. The House bill, Affordable Care Act, House bill, was actually, in my opinion, a much better bill.
Yes. I remember reading about this.
And it had a public option in it.
Yeah.
And so when it came time to push something through to vote on it, we had to actually all vote on the Senate bill. And a lot of people didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
Because they did not like a lot of things. Because it was very much more to the right than what the House bill was.
And if I'm remembering correctly, that's because, Pelosi and Reid were trying to get bipartisan support. They were trying to work with Republicans so that everybody was included, so everyone felt like they had buy-in. And then at the last minute, Republicans were like, "We're not supporting this." Yeah,
walked away, and that's the. I guess that's our fault, the Democrats, right? We try to get them to play nice in sandbox.
Yeah,
and when they don't, then we're stuck sometimes. So we had to vote for the Senate bill, and I remember being in a caucus, the Democrats talking about this, and a lot of people were angry, and they said, "I can't vote for this. Can't vote for this part of it, that part of it." And I'll never forget John Lewis getting up when John Lewis gave a speech, and he talked about a lot of things that he'd been through in his life. And he said, now is the moment and now is the time. If we don't pass this health care bill now, we're going to be decades.
Yeah.
That's how long they'd already been trying. So it's not perfect, but we're at least opening the door.
Yeah.
And letting the horse out of the barn and getting something that and as we know, millions and millions of people have benefited from a not perfect bill.
Yes.
But at least a bill that we get.
And I think millions more would benefit, had 2016, 2024 gone differently, and we'd had majorities continue improving, because that's something that Secretary Clinton ran on in 2016 was, it's not perfect, but let's make it better. And man, I hope that, there are provisions for the Supreme Court. I hope that those, stand through that. And yeah, I'm not being very coherent right now, but
No, it's
hard to care.
I think we're all yeah. I mean, we're all so overwhelmed with everything going on right now in Washington, and it's every day, and I think that's on purpose.
Absolutely.
throwing it out. It's hard to really it's hard for us to keep up.
Yeah.
Nobody can keep up. I mean, I think the best journalists can keep up on what's going on.
Not at all.
Or
podcasters.
They're trying really hard, though. They're doing a better job.
Maybe, yeah.
But no, I think, so when you look at these kind of bills like Dodd-Frank and the Affordable Care Act and, the big pieces of legislation, they always need to be adjusted as time goes on.
Yeah.
And there's no point.
Absolutely not. Before I move on to your county executive record, is there anything about the time in Congress that I there's a lot that happened, so I'm kind of got the greatest hits in here, but I feel like we could talk for hours about everything that happened.
We could. I mean, there is so many things. I mean, it was truly an honor and a privilege for me to be there. I can't say enough about those 2 years of my life, how they changed my life, and how I think I helped to change some little piece of this country in a better way. And I'm an old Girl Scout, so the old motto, like, leave the forest better than you found it.
Yeah.
I think I left the country better than I found it.
I would agree, especially with what's happened since. So thank you. Moving on to your time as county executive, the red wave of 2010 happens.
Mhm.
You are unfortunately not reelected. You ran for county executive here in Erie in 2013. How did you pick yourself up after that 2010 loss and decide, no, I'm still here for public service. I'm still going to do what I can to make the world a better place. And what do you feel you accomplished, and what do you feel your legacy will be? That's three different questions.
That is three different questions. But, so after I lost, and I came back home, and not that I wasn't home because I was here every weekend when I was in Congress too. That's a big place to be back and forth. But I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I went back to our business and I tried working there, but there was just something lacking. And I was like, I really liked being in public service. And I think I was very effective at it. And I think it actually suits my skill set.
Yeah.
So I thought, 7 counties, I always had a favorite one. I'm a mother of 5. I never really wanted to say I had a favorite child, but I definitely had a favorite county. It was Erie County. So I thought, what can I do locally? And I actually looked at the mayor's seat and I looked at the county executive seat because I do live in the city of Erie.
Yeah.
And I just decided the county government was much more aligned to who I am and what I care about, because county government is really about people.
Yeah.
We don't pave streets. We don't plow. We're more about people through human services, health department, etc.
Yeah.
So there was an incumbent Democrat in the seats. So I did not think that person was very effective, and he had a very bad relationship with the county council at the time. And I thought things are not going to get done because of, again, this tension, this infighting that was happening, as well as tension with other elected officials outside of county government. And so, surprise to many people, I decided to take on the Democratic incumbent in that seat, and I abused my personality in a primary, and then of course the Republican candidate was a very strong candidate, and won that pretty easily. But I think I surprised a lot of people, but I wasn't afraid to do that. And a lot of people say, well, you can't take on an incumbent in your own party. I'm like, well, if they aren't really doing the job that needs to be done, they can.
Yeah. And if you have a clear, I guess, spoil to that person, and you are able to say, here's what they're not doing, here's what I'll do. We just saw this in Mill Creek, 2 years ago for one of the controller seats. So I think, it's great.
Yeah. Yeah. And, right now we have a mayor who's being challenged in the city of Erie by somebody in his own party.
Yeah.
And
my first guest.
And I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think sometimes if somebody isn't doing their job, and doing it well, then everyone has a right. And actually, it's a democracy. Anybody has a right to run anyway.
Yeah.
And I don't like it when people say, "Oh, you should run," because that's not what a democracy is about. You can run if you want to.
Yeah.
You may or may not win, but you have a right to run.
Especially in a moment like this where people feel change needs to happen. We have a senator here in Pennsylvania who I proudly voted for, and has kind of changed his direction a little bit. And people are talking about primarying him in the future. And I think that's a big question mark. But I think people, if there's a justifiable reason to do it, do it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
What do you feel you accomplished?
As county executive?
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
a long
First of all,
time
I love
exercise.
being county executive.
Yeah.
I actually, as amazing as my time in Congress was, and I'm so grateful to have had that time to be able to serve. I love being county executive because you can get things done. You can get things done quickly. You're an executive, so you're not waiting for,
Yeah.
200 and some people to come along with you and to
Right.
make something happen. You just have to get your county council to agree upon it.
Yeah.
So, you can get a lot of things done. My biggest accomplishment was getting to college over the finish line. That's something, again, like healthcare, that was tried and tried and tried for years and years and years. And we were finally able to do that during my tenure as county executive. And it was a hard fought effort to get that done, but we did it. But I think that's one of my biggest legacies. I mean, there's other things that people don't really think about. We put in a brand new public safety radio system.
Yeah.
Before that, everybody couldn't talk to each other. So, for example, if there was a big incident and involved more than one department, so like something happened in Mill Creek, but they needed assistance from Erie, or they needed assistance from Fairview. Let's just say a big fire. Okay.
Yeah.
The fire departments couldn't talk to each other, and often even within the same borough or township, they sometimes couldn't talk to each other because they were on different radio systems. And I learned more about radio systems than I ever thought I would want to know, but I learned a lot. And now we have complete interoperability between it's everyone in the whole town. So if we had a big tornado here, or we had a big, huge accident on I-90, or God forbid, a plane crash or something really big like that, where you're bringing in a lot of different departments, everybody can talk to each other.
Yeah.
And even on the small incidents, they can. You have a criminal who's on a car chase from one area to another. Everybody can talk to each other.
Yeah.
And so it's a huge safety thing for people. It's a small thing, but it's big. It's about people's safety.
I think most people just kind of don't think about that kind of stuff.
Right.
And that's critically important.
It was a very expensive system, and everybody liked the system they were on. So in many ways, it was kind of herding cats to bring everyone together to say, can we all agree on one type of system and one type of radio? And it was years. It took us years to get there, but we did it and we accomplished it. And people are like, wow, that people that are in that world, that they didn't think we were going to get it done.
Yeah.
And we did it.
And
So. And those are just a couple of things. I mean, there's just so many things. We put the Idea Lab into the library, which I think is so important for the entrepreneurship piece, and then we're part of what they call the Beehive Network, which is between the universities and our public library. And so we're part of now economic development and that entrepreneurship piece that's so important. Help to revamp the entire economic development piece of your county.
Mm-hmm.
Your county redevelopment authority is much stronger and much more impactful today than it was when I came into office. Yeah. And so we did that. And that's another piece, again, most people don't think about, but the work that's getting done through them, whether it's tearing down the Quinton T site that's on French and 18th or something like that, 16th, I think. And then what they're going to be doing at the corner of Cherry and 12th, and a lot of other smaller things that most people would need to know about. But these are really transformational things happening in our community. And then one thing I hope that still happens is a national marine sanctuary through NOAA. And that would designate all of the waters within Pennsylvania in Lake Erie as a protected for the resources that are underneath, which are the historical fact, the historical things. We have shipwrecks. We have almost 170 shipwrecks in our waters, and they represent every type of sailing vessel that ever sailed in the Great Lakes. Yeah, and there's other marine sanctuaries. One in Lake Huron, one in Lake Michigan, and now one in Lake Ontario. We be part of this connection of marine sanctuaries, and for most people that don't understand the overall effect, but the science and research that comes in, and then they work with our school systems to bring the kids out to learn about all of this history and research and science and STEM. I saw it happen up in Alpena, Michigan, a small community way up in the mid, and it transformed that community. And here in Erie County, you already have a nice marine campus, and to tie all those entities together and create something bigger, it's basically like having a national park.
Okay, yeah.
I guess that's the best way to explain it to people.
Yeah.
It's like having a national park right here on our shore.
Yeah.
And it brings people to our community. And tourism is also a big part of our economy.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm hoping that that happens. It's on the way, but with this new administration, there are some halts that we're not sure are going to be complete stops or just temporary.
Well, let's hope 10 months from now, it's a very different conversation.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to come in back in and talk about that.
I'd be happy to have you. I do want to ask you about the community college.
Sure.
Because, I've had Christina Vogel, I've had Perry Wood, some of our Democrats running for county executive to replace the current guy. And both of them talked about that. Both of them talked about wanting to, continue that we strengthen it, and how the community college plays a role in our society here, with filling necessary roles, and getting people into skilled trades and out into the community, and economic development, progressing economic development. What was your role? Because you kind of spearheaded this whole thing.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to give credit where credit's due, and Andre Horton got Ronnie Nicola together. The two of them came into my office,
Okay.
and they wanted to kind of reinvigorate this effort that had been tried and tried and tried.
Yeah.
I had been tried under my predecessor, had been tried for a long time and had not been successful. And I agreed. I said, yes, let's do this. And Empower Erie was created to do some of the work outside of county government needed to happen to support this. But it was my administration and my signature that went into the application that went into the state. And we were very instrumental in making sure that that was an application that was sound and would pass.
Yeah.
And then we fought hard, and we were fought against by Senator Scarnati, who's not even from Northwest Pennsylvania, but he fought our efforts because he had started something else called the NPRC. I have to remember what the actual acronym stands for, but Northern Pennsylvania Regional College.
Okay.
And it's a very different model, but it's not a true community college. And people were saying, "Oh, why do we need a community college? Because we already have all these universities here." Well, it's a different piece of our education continuum. And so now that we have it, of course, people are like, "Wow, that's great."
Of course.
And it's really reacting to what our business needs are.
Yeah.
And I know others can talk much more complete about this. But, the businesses who need different skill sets that we don't need them to go to Mercyhurst or Penn West or Dannon or Barron. They need just some skills to get them to the point where they can get into this business and do the work.
Yeah.
Whatever that might be. CNG, welding, nurses aides, a lot of different careers like that don't need a 4-year degree.
Yeah.
And if they want to go into college, then they have a background and they can get their 4-year degree after that too.
Yeah.
So they have a good heads up on that. So yeah, I was very, very instrumental in fighting this Bernardi effort and finally making sure that the state Board of Education understood the importance of this for our region and that we had enough support within our region. And again, I did all sorts of town hall meetings.
Yeah.
And because some of the people were like, "You shouldn't do those." I'm like, "Yes, we're doing them because they work." And we did many of them that we did bring in the constituents and they could hear what's community college was going to do for them and for their kids and for the future of this region. So I think we've only hit tip of the iceberg of what this community college is going to mean to this community in the long run. And the interesting thing is I didn't know Christina Vogel, but she had applied to be on the board of trustees. I had an open process. People could apply to be on that board of trustees. And I interviewed her and I was so impressed with her background and everything she brought to that. And so now she's been on it for 5 years and helped to shape what the community college is today.
Yeah.
So I can look back at that effort and say, that's changing people's lives.
Yeah.
It really is. A lot of people tell me that they've gone there, they go there. I've gone to the graduations. It's so inspiring. If anybody wants to find out a little bit about the community college, go to their graduation coming up in May, and everybody's welcome. And you will be just inspired by the stories.
And you touched on two things that I kind of want to follow up with you. And I feel like two things there that come up with Democrats a lot. One, this executes on a thing that a lot of Democrats talk about, which is you don't need a 4-year degree to be successful, to have the life, to find a good paying job. This is a tangible example of that. Um, and the other thing is, you mentioned that you fought, and we hear that word a lot, especially now online. What does that mean to you? What does it mean to fight for a cause? What does it mean? What did that look like for you, fighting for the community college?
Not bowing to the pressures that come in, and there was a lot of pressures to back off on this thing.
Okay.
There were a lot of political pressures.
Yeah.
But again, I asked myself, what's the right thing to do?
Yeah.
And the right thing to do was to go forward and make sure we had a true community college
Yeah.
in your county. So burning some political capital,
Hmm.
having some very powerful people on the phone with you who are not happy with you because of how you're pushing back and saying, no, we're not going to settle for less.
Yeah.
We're going to we want the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it, was not backing down.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of pressure. There was a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And, I only won my reelection by a little over 300 votes.
Yeah.
And I was doing a lot of good things.
I voted for you.
I thought people liked me.
Yeah.
But you know what? I was doing something. I was trying to get a community college here.
Yeah.
And that was the negative thing against me for that election.
Yeah.
And I almost lost my election over it because my opponent is attacking me all over the place about community college and how it's going to raise our taxes. And so, again, I could have maybe gone home and then for the community college program even today if I hadn't got reelected. But you have to do the right thing.
Yeah. And how much of that 300 vote margin would you attribute to us losing GE in 2016? I mean, I know that the area was much bluer before that happened. Um, and it was a lot of union people working in those jobs. And then, they left and the area got a little bit more purple. So giving credit where credit's due, I mean, you were doing a lot of great things, but also the environment changed.
The environment changed, and it was right after Trump was elected.
Yeah.
So I think there was still a bit of a wave from his election that also hurt me.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of a red wave. Um, and, so the time wasn't great on my reelection, but I stayed over that. So, yeah, I do think that that's hurt us certainly in terms of the professional seat.
Yes.
Think about GE becoming lab tech and being a shadow of what it used to be. We look at Mercer County, there was such strong union support in Mercer County, that's a shadow of what it used to be.
Yeah.
And you could probably say that all over the district, and it certainly can say that in Earring too. Those blue collar jobs, good family sustaining wage jobs are a fraction of what they were when I was growing up. I even probably did this one on the director.
Yeah.
And my dad was a GE person. And I remember going out there as a kid and there's 18,000 people at that factory. But yeah, who's out there?
Yeah.
So it's just so different. And a lot of that's too robotics. People don't think about that.
Yeah.
It's manufacturing has definitely changed.
Yeah.
And you do require a higher skilled worker. And that's why the community college, again,
Yep.
is important. You just can't take the person coming out of high school with no skills and put them in there and running some very technical machine.
Yeah.
So you need somebody who can be trained in the community college to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we've mentioned it's an election year for this county executive seat. We have a guy in the seat right now that I won't speak too much on, but not fond of him, not a fan. I've had, as I mentioned, Christina Vogel has come on here, Terry Wood has come on here. We're hoping to have a Democrat in that seat. What advice would you give to the person who succeeds? I'm going to say we're going to win that seat. What would you say to whoever that person is?
Well, we are definitely going to win that seat if I ever can do it, because I'm working hard to make sure we win that seat.
Yeah.
Because what I would say the first thing they need to do is care about people.
Yeah.
Care about the people that work in county government. Care about the people that they're going to serve. Because as I said earlier, the county government is a lot about people.
Yeah.
When you serve people, we often serve the most vulnerable people.
Yes.
So you have to have a compassionate heart. You have to understand what people are going through and know that we are sometimes the only thing keeping them from disaster.
Yeah.
So so going into it with the right frame of mind is really important. And we need somebody in there who can really handle this fiscal cliff we're coming to.
Yep.
Because the current county executive has drained the huge reserve fund I left,
Yeah.
has decimated a lot of the county finances from where they were when I left. And so you need somebody who can really look at that budget, figure out a way to get us through this and get us back on track with all the federal cuts that are coming.
Yeah.
Because county government is a small portion local money, big portion state money, and a decent portion federal money.
Yeah.
So I think the state money will still be coming, but we're going to lose a lot of federal dollars. And so how do you prioritize what is needed to happen? So that would be, I mean, those are the big things that they're going to have to face.
Yeah. And how would you communicate to people what you are doing? Because we see this all the time. A Republican comes in, wrecks an economy, and then Democrat fixes it. And
Absolutely. It happens over and over again.
Yep.
It's just a cycle that we keep going through. And
Yep.
it's like they don't see it. I don't get it. But that is really, really important that we're going to have to go in there and we're going to have to fix things. We've lost a lot of really good employees in county government.
Yeah.
I always was amazed at the skill set and passion and just how talented people in county government were.
Yeah.
And still are.
Yeah.
But a lot of them have left because of the environment. The environment is toxic.
Yeah.
And people that all that work in a toxic environment. And so you also need, next time that it has to be a person who understands the value of food.
Yeah. Who knew? I'm gonna wrap up with a couple questions about your path, Women in the Future. What made you decide to begin that pack, and what does it seek to do?
Well, I really believe we need more women in office. I think we need, thanks. I think that we need a more diverse set of people at all tables where decisions are being made.
Yes.
We need younger people, older people. We need women. We need men. We need white people of color. We need people of all sorts of different sexual orientations. We just need to look more like the people we serve.
Yes.
And I know when I left office as county executive, I was often the only woman who could say one when decisions were being made in our community. And so I think right now, that's still the way it is. Often at these tables, there's only white males sitting at these tables.
Yeah.
And so one thing I'm passionate about is trying to get more women to think about running, to consider running, and then to be supported running.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think women often have to be asked to run.
Yeah.
That's actually statistically been shown
Yeah.
through research, where a lot of men will just wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, and think, today I'm going to run for president of the United States. And we have a president who did that, right? So anyway, that's different for women. They tend to have to be more brought forward and say, yeah, you can do this. A woman might have the same education, it may be even more education than her opponent, but she still thinks she's going to get another degree.
Yeah.
So it's like, no, you can do this. You have the skill set. So we try to mentor them, invite them to run, mentor them through the running, and then we have a pack. So they'll actually pay a little bit of money, and then they actually do endorsements, and we actually get those cash because you cannot run a race
without money.
Whether it's school board all the way up to president. You gotta have money.
Yeah. And I agree with you that I think there's a lot of headway to be made when it comes to having more women at the table. I would say, I don't know if you would agree with this. The way that it feels, we're making very slow progress on seeing, more women in positions of authority across the country, but, still obviously not enough. Taking it right to the top, what do you think it's going to take to see a woman shatter that glass ceiling and be elected to the highest office in the land?
Well, I really had hoped we'd be not having this conversation today, right?
Same.
Now twice now we've experienced this. And well, first of all, we got to build our bench. And that's what we're trying to do here in Arizona.
Yeah.
Build a bench. And I'm very excited to say there are well over 70 women running in Erie County this election.
Yeah.
So look for their names on the ballots. They're all over the place, from school boards to boroughs to townships, local, county executive, mayor. And so anyway, check out those candidates. But when it comes to that highest office, it's tough. I mean, we've had two really great candidates, but very accomplished people who had the background, who had the education, who had the personality, whatever it takes, and I still think that there is a bias against a woman being that high of an office.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's going to pay for that. And I see right now, this current administration doing more and more things to try to tamp down women's place in leadership roles.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to remain optimistic. I've tried to look at, what could there's a lot of things attributed to sexism and misogyny with Clinton and with Harris, and I agree with all of them. Yet I'm hoping that the fact that they were running on the heels of a Democratic incumbent maybe played a role or something, and that happens naturally. I'm hoping that we will have, I'm hoping Harris runs again in 2028. There's a lot of great candidates that I think could run, but among them many women. But we'll see what happens when it's on the fields of a Republican president. And I'm hoping that maybe that will be enough to push it over the edge. But man, I agree with you. Clinton and Harris were two of the most qualified people to ever run, and I think they did cartwheels and jumped through hoops that men never have to think about.
But you know what? We've made it okay to talk in ways that are sexist, racist, misogynistic, and that is so disturbing.
To close this out on a slightly maybe sunnier note,
That'd be great.
what opportunities do you see for Erie, for the country? Where do you think that if we nudge things in the right direction, where do you think we can go? It's a bit broad, but
I think. Well, I think we can always go anywhere. That if we have a lot of great people with a lot of ingenuity and a lot of drive, and we just need to give them the right climate to take that and make things happen. And I think in this region, there's a lot of really positive things going on right now, despite all the negative stuff on the national level. I feel very optimistic about Northwest Pennsylvania and Erie County in particular. I think there's great opportunity. We just have to have the right leaders in place to make it happen. And we have to stop trying to do it on our own.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think the current county executive tries to do a lot of things on his own and doesn't really partner well with people. And that was another big piece of advice the county executive come in is to partner. There's a lot of very, very smart people out there who can help get things done with partner with it. So I think there's a lot of great opportunities. We know that Erie County could be so much better than it is. Yeah. It doesn't matter that it snows here. Like it said. I love snow, by the way. But
same, within reason.
We have to sell it, and but people come here and they love it. And they're like, oh my gosh, this place is so amazingly beautiful. And the people are so friendly and there's so much to do here, and so how do we make sure that there's jobs here for them? Yeah. Because that is the problem. Their career, even though a lot of people have been working remotely, not everybody can.
Right.
And there just hasn't been some of the job opportunities here.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was great. I hope I didn't talk too long, but these amazing answers, and I think
I enjoyed it very much. It's really good fun.